You're listening to Dead Signal, classic Halloween stories to fall asleep to. The nights are colder now. The wind sounds like it's whispering through bare trees, and somewhere down the street, someone's pumpkin candle just went out. It's that time again, the season of masks, flickering lights, and old stories that refuse to die. Before the jump scares, before the movies, before the internet, there were words on a page, ink and fear, and the kind of imagination that could keep a candle burning till dawn. These are those stories, pulled from the dusty shelves of classic horror, tales of wishes gone wrong, doors that shouldn't open, and things that knock when no one should be knocking. So, wherever you are tonight, maybe you're driving through fog, or half asleep in bed, phone glow on your face. This signal is for you. Settle in. Take a deep breath. Let the shadows crawl a little closer. Because Halloween isn't a night, it's a frequency. And right now, you're tuned in. This is Dead Signal. Classic Halloween stories to fall asleep to. Please like, subscribe, and stay with us. More transmissions coming nightly until the lights go out. In a quiet house, a single candle flickers, casting long shadows against the walls. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, whispering of things that should never be wished for. This is the chilling world of The Monkey's Paw, a timeless tale of desire, fate, and the terrifying consequences of getting exactly what you want. Imagine holding an object that promises to grant 3 wishes. What would you ask for? Wealth? Happiness? But this story warns us that longing can bend the rules of the world in horrifying ways, and that a terrible price often comes with tampering with destiny. So, lean in closer, but maybe keep your eyes half closed. Keep your breath steady, because some wishes are better left unspoken. If you enjoy tales that linger long after the story ends. Without, the night was cold and wet, but in the small parlor of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. A classic opening for a cozy evening, don't you think? Father and son are locked in a tense game of chess. The father, Mr. White, has some rather creative ideas about the game, putting his king in constant danger. It's so reckless that even his wife, knitting peacefully by the fire, has to make a comment. "Hark at the wind," Mr. White says, trying to distract his son from a fatal mistake he's just made on the board. But his son, Herbert, is not so easily fooled. "I'm listening," he replies. His eyes fixed on the game, he stretches out his hand. "Check." Mr. White stalls. "I should hardly think you'd come tonight." But Herbert is relentless. "Mate." Losing the game, Mr. White suddenly explodes with frustration. Not at the chessboard, but at their home. That's the worst of living so far out. Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. His wife tries to soothe him. "Never mind, dear. Perhaps you'll win the next one." Mr. White catches a knowing look between his wife and son and hides a guilty little grin in his beard. Just then, the gate outside bangs loudly. Heavy footsteps approach the door. "There he is," says Herbert. "The family's guest has arrived." Mr. White hurries to open the door and soon returns with a tall, burly man with a weathered face and bright, beady eyes. "Sergeant Major Morris," Mr. White announces. The sergeant major settles by the fire, and after a few glasses of whiskey, he starts to tell his stories. The family listens, captivated by tales of his 21 years in India, a land of wild scenes, wars, plagues, and strange peoples. Mr. White reminisces. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth. Now look at him. The conversation turns to the mystical side of India. The old temples, fakirs, and jugglers. That's when Mr. White remembers something. What was that you started telling me the other day about a monkey's paw or something, Morris? The soldier dismisses it. Nothing. Leastways nothing worth hearing. But Mrs. White is curious. Monkey's paw? The sergeant major hesitates. Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps. The family leans in, their interest piqued. To look at, he says, fumbling in his pocket. It's just an ordinary little paw, dried to a mummy. He pulls it out. Mrs. White recoils. But Herbert takes it and examines it. What's so special about it? Mr. White asks, taking the object and placing it on the table. It had a spell put on it by an old fakir, the sergeant major explains, his voice growing serious. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it, so that 3 separate men could each have 3 wishes from it. The family's light laughter dies down, silenced by his solemn tone. Well, why don't you have 3 wishes, sir? Herbert asks. The soldier's face pales. I have, he says quietly. And did you really have the 3 wishes granted? Mrs. White presses. I did, he confirms, his glass tapping against his teeth. Has anybody else wished? She continues. The first man had his 3 wishes. Yes, I don't know what the first 2 were, but the 3rd was for death. That's how I got the paw. A hush falls over the room. If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now then, Mr. White says. What do you keep it for? The soldier shakes his head. Fancy, I suppose. I did have some idea of selling it, but it has caused enough mischief already. He looks at the paw, dangling it from his fingers, and then, with a sudden movement, he throws it into the fire. With a small cry, Mr. White lunges forward and snatches it from the flames. Better let it burn, the soldier says solemnly. If you don't want it, Morris, give it to me. Mr. White pleads. I won't, his friend replies. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire again, like a sensible man. But Mr. White clutches his new possession. How do you do it? He asks. Hold it up in your right hand and wish aloud, the sergeant major warns. But I warn you of the consequences. The mood lightens as Mrs. White prepares supper. The paw is momentarily forgotten as Sergeant Major Morris continues his tales of India. After their guest leaves to catch the last train, Herbert jokes, if the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those he has been telling us, we should make much out of it. He then playfully suggests, wish to be an emperor, father, to begin with. Mr. White holds the paw, uncertain. I don't know what to wish for. It seems to me I've got all I want. Herbert becomes serious for a moment. If you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you? Well, wish for 200 pounds then. That'll just do it. Shamed by his own belief, but giving in, Mr. White holds up the talisman. His son sits at the piano, ready to add some dramatic flair. I wish for 200 pounds, the old man says clearly. A loud chord crashes from the piano, but it's cut short by a shuddering cry from Mr. White. His wife and son rush to his side. It moved, he cries, staring in disgust at the paw now lying on the floor. As I wished, it twisted in my hand like a snake. Herbert picks it up. Well, I don't see the money, he says, and I bet I never shall. Mrs. White tries to reassure her husband. It must have been your fancy, father. But he shakes his head. There's no harm done, but it gave me a shock all the same. They settle back by the fire, but a strange, depressing silence falls over them. Outside, the wind howls. As his parents head to bed, Herbert jokes one last time. I expect you'll find the cash in a big bag in the middle of your bed, and something horrible squatting on top of the wardrobe watching you. Left alone, Herbert stares into the dying embers of the fire, seeing faces in the flames. The last one is so grotesque, so monkey-like, that it unnerves him. He reaches for a glass of water to douse the image, but his hand closes around the monkey's paw instead. With a shiver, he wipes his hand on his coat and heads up to bed, into the uneasy silence of the house. And this is only the beginning. Have you ever heard a story that truly makes your skin crawl? Not with jump scares, but with a deep, unsettling dread. This is Ambrose Bierce's The Damned Thing. Imagine this. A man is found torn to pieces in a field. The witnesses swear nothing was there. No animal, no person. They saw only the flattened grass, as if something immense and heavy was moving. The inquest finds he was killed by a wild animal. But one witness, a man of science, knows the terrifying truth. He claims the man was killed by a creature we can't see, a being whose color is outside the spectrum of human vision, a thing that is all around us but remains invisible. The scariest part? It's still out there. So, the next time you see the grass sway on a windless day, maybe don't look too closely. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoy a good scare, be sure to subscribe for more. The Damned Thing by Ambrose Bierce. By the dim, flickering light of a tallow candle, a man sat reading from an old, worn account book. The writing was faint, and he often had to hold the page close to the flame, casting half the room into deep shadow. 8 other men were present. 7 sat silently against the rough log walls, their rugged faces stoic and unmoving. They were farmers and woodmen, men of the wilderness. The 8th man lay on the table, face up, still and lifeless, covered by a sheet. He was dead. The man with the book, the coroner, read in silence. No one spoke. They were all waiting, all but the dead man. From the blackness outside came the lonely, ever unfamiliar noises of the night. The distant cry of a coyote, the hum of insects, the strange calls of night birds. But no one in the room took notice. The coroner was different from the others. He had an air of the world about him, a hint of authority. The book he held had been found among the dead man's things here in his cabin, where this very inquest was taking place. When the coroner finished reading, he tucked the book into his pocket. Just then, the door creaked open, and a young man entered. He was clearly a city dweller, though his clothes were dusty from a hard ride. This was the witness they had been waiting for. The coroner nodded. "We have waited for you," he said. "It is necessary to have done with this business tonight." The young man, a journalist, smiled faintly. "I am sorry to have kept you," he replied. "I went to post an account of what I suppose I am called back to relate." The coroner's own smile was thin. "The account you posted to your newspaper," he said, "differs probably from that which you will give here under oath." The young man flushed. "That is as you choose. I used manifold paper and have a copy. It was not written as news, for it is incredible, but as fiction. It may go as a part of my testimony, but you say it is incredible, the coroner pointed out. That is nothing to you, sir, if I also swear that it is true. The coroner paused, then said, We will resume the inquest. The men removed their hats. The witness was sworn. What is your name? William Harker. Age? 27. You knew the deceased, Hugh Morgan? Yes. You were with him when he died? Near him. How did that happen? I was visiting him to shoot and fish. But I also wanted to study him, his solitary life. He seemed a good model for a character in fiction. I sometimes write stories. I sometimes read them, the coroner said dryly. Stories in general, not yours. A few of the jurors chuckled, a brief flash of humor against the grim backdrop. Relate the circumstances of this man's death, the coroner commanded. You may use any notes you please. Harker understood. He pulled a manuscript from his pocket, found the passage he needed, and began to read. The sun had hardly risen when we left the house. We were looking for quail, each with a shotgun. Morgan said our best ground was beyond a certain ridge. On the other side was a field of wild oats. As we emerged from the chaparral, Morgan was a few yards ahead. Suddenly, we heard a thrashing in the bushes to our right. The brush was violently agitated. We've started a deer, I said. Morgan didn't answer. He had cocked both barrels of his gun and was staring intently. I thought he seemed overly excited, which was strange for a man known for his coolness. You aren't going to fill a deer with quail shot, are you? I asked. He didn't reply, but when he turned his face slightly toward me, I was struck by its deathly pallor. I understood then that this was serious. My first thought was a grizzly bear. I cocked my own gun and moved to his side. The bushes were quiet now, but Morgan remained fixed on the spot. What is it? What the devil is it? I demanded. That damned thing, he whispered, his voice husky and unnatural. He was trembling. Just then, I saw the wild oats near the bushes moving in the most inexplicable way. It was as if a streak of invisible wind was pressing them down, crushing them flat so they didn't rise again. And this line of movement was slowly, steadily, advancing directly toward us. Nothing had ever affected me so strangely. We rely on the orderly operation of natural laws, and any suspension of them feels like a threat. This causeless movement was deeply disquieting. My companion was terrified. I could hardly believe my eyes when he suddenly threw his gun to his shoulder and fired both barrels into the agitated grass. Before the smoke cleared, I heard a loud, savage cry, a scream like a wild animal. Morgan threw his gun down and ran. At the same instant, I was thrown violently to the ground by the impact of something unseen in the smoke, something soft and heavy. Before I could get up, I heard Morgan crying out in mortal agony. His cries mixed with hoarse, savage sounds like fighting dogs. Inexpressibly terrified, I scrambled to my feet, and may heaven spare me from another sight like that. Less than 30 yards away was my friend, down on one knee, his head thrown back at a frightful angle, his whole body thrashing violently. His right arm was lifted and seemed to be missing a hand. The other arm was invisible. At times it was as if parts of his body were being blotted out of existence, then reappearing as he shifted. He looked like a wrestler being crushed by a superior, unseen opponent. All the while, his shouts and curses were drowned out by an unearthly uproar of rage and fury. For a moment, I stood frozen. Then I ran to help him, thinking he was having some kind of fit. Before I could reach him, he was down and quiet. All sound ceased. Then, with a new wave of terror, I saw it. The same mysterious movement in the wild oats leading away from his prostrate body toward the woods. Only when it disappeared into the trees could I look at my companion. He was dead. The coroner rose and walked to the body. He pulled back the sheet, exposing the naked corpse. In the candlelight, the skin was a clay-like yellow, marked with broad, bluish-black bruises. The chest and sides looked as if they had been beaten with a club. There were dreadful lacerations, the skin torn into strips. The coroner moved to the head of the table and untied a silk handkerchief from around the man's neck, exposing what had been his throat. Some jurors turned away, sickened. Harker leaned out the window, faint. The coroner then produced Morgan's clothing. Piece by piece, all were torn and stiff with blood. The jurors, who had seen this before, seemed uninterested. The only new element was Harker's testimony. "Gentlemen," the coroner said, "we have no more evidence. You may go outside and consider your verdict." The foreman, a tall, bearded man, stood up. "I'd like to ask one question, Mr. Coroner," he said. "What asylum did this here last witness escape from?" The coroner turned to Harker, his face grave. "Mr. Harker, from what asylum did you last escape?" Harker flushed crimson, but said nothing as the 7 jurors solemnly filed out. "If you have done insulting me, sir," Harker said, once they were alone, "I suppose I am at liberty to go?" "Yes." Harker started to leave, but paused at the door. The journalist in him was too strong. He turned back. "The book that you have there, I recognize it as Morgan's diary. You were reading it while I was testifying. May I see it? The public would like—" "The book will cut no figure in this matter," the coroner replied, slipping it back into his pocket. "All the entries in it were made before the writer's death." As Harker left, the jury re-entered. The foreman sat down, took out a pencil and paper, and laboriously wrote out the verdict, which all of them signed. "We, the jury, do find that the remains come to their death at the hands of a mountain lion, but some of us thinks, all the same, they had fits." He writes, "Would run in a half circle, keeping his head turned, always toward the center, and again he would stand still, barking furiously. At last, he ran away into the brush as fast as he could go." Morgan wonders if this was just madness or something else. He asks himself, can a dog see with his nose? Do odors impress some olfactory center with images of the thing emitting them? He's trying to find a rational explanation for the dog's sheer terror. The next entry is dated September 2nd. Morgan is stargazing and notices something deeply disturbing. "I observed them successively disappear, from left to right. Each was eclipsed but an instant. It was as if something had passed along between me and them, but I could not see it." Imagine that, an invisible force, large enough to block out the stars, moving silently along the ridge near his home. He ends the entry with a simple, chilling statement. "Ugh, I don't like this." After this, several pages are torn from the diary. We jump ahead to September 27th. The tone has shifted from uneasy to desperate. "It has been about here again. I find evidences of its presence every day." He spent an entire night hiding with a shotgun, determined to confront whatever was stalking his property. But in the morning, all he found were fresh footprints. He didn't sleep. He swears it, yet something was there. He's on the edge, writing, "If these amazing experiences are real, I shall go mad. If they are fanciful, I am mad already. By early October, his resolve is crumbling. I shall not go. It shall not drive me away. No, this is my house, my land. God hates a coward. But just 2 days later, on October 5th, he gives in. I can stand it no longer. I have invited Harker to pass a few weeks with me. He has a level head. I can judge from his manner if he thinks me mad. He's so desperate for validation, to know he isn't losing his mind. Then, on October 7th, everything changes. He believes he's found the answer. I have the solution of the problem. It came to me last night, suddenly, as by revelation. How simple. How terribly simple. His explanation starts not with the supernatural, but with science. He talks about sounds we can't hear. He describes a flock of blackbirds, all taking flight at the exact same instant, too far apart to see a letter. He proposes they must have heard a signal, a command too high-pitched for the human ear. He draws another parallel with whales, miles apart, diving in perfect sync. Sailors can't hear the signal, but they can feel its low-frequency vibrations through the hull of the ship. Morgan's logic is building. Our senses are limited. We only perceive a tiny fraction of the world around us. And then he makes the final terrifying leap. As with sounds, so with colors. He mentions the invisible parts of the light spectrum, the actinic rays that chemists can detect, but our eyes can't see. The human eye is an imperfect instrument, he writes. Its range is but a few octaves of the real chromatic scale. And this is where his sanity and the story take a dark turn. His final entry is a scream of realization and horror. I am not mad. There are colors that we cannot see, and God help me. The damned thing is of such a color, an entity, real and solid, but composed of a color beyond the scope of human vision. An invisible predator. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and creepy as I did, hit that like button and be sure to subscribe for more dives into the strange and unexplained.